I fled domestic violence. My partner beat me for years. The police in my country refused to help me. They told me it was a family matter. I reported the violence again and again. Nothing changed. I left everything behind. My home, my family, my country. I'm now in the United Kingdom. And I have one question. Can I get asylum? This is a question we hear very often. Domestic violence is one of the most common reasons people seek asylum. Today we are looking at 35 real cases from 19 countries. We will explain how asylum tribunals assess these claims, and we will show you what country experts look for when they prepare their reports. We base these videos on the analysis of real cases of people facing persecution in their home countries. We are country expert witnesses from London, focusing on human rights violations. We receive cases from major law firms who represent asylum seekers in the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, and the European Union. Our goal is to prepare evidence-based assessments and expert witness reports for asylum tribunals. Today, domestic violence and asylum. Let us start with the numbers. They are shocking. The World Health Organization, in global estimates updated in 2025, reports that nearly 1 in 3 women worldwide, around 840 million, have experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner or non-partner in their lifetime. The scale of this problem has barely changed in decades. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says domestic violence is the most common form of gender-based violence reported by refugee women. In the United Kingdom, the Home Office receives thousands of asylum claims every year where domestic violence is the main reason for fleeing. Many of these claims come from countries where the law does not protect women or where the law exists on paper, but the police refuse to enforce it. Today we are looking at 19 countries: Albania, Georgia, Ethiopia, India, Russia, Pakistan, Somalia, Eritrea, Belarus, Bangladesh, Nicaragua, Syria, Djibouti, Libya, Sudan, Jordan, Nigeria, Trinidad and Tobago, and Rwanda. If you are from one of these countries, keep watching. We have analyzed real cases from your country. The United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, addressed the Human Rights Council on 23rd of February 2026. He said, "Human rights are under a full-scale attack around the world. The rule of law is being outmuscled by the rule of force." He also spoke of NGOs being shut down, women's rights being rolled back, children's rights ignored, persons with disabilities excluded, and democracies eroding. If you are from one of these countries and you have faced domestic violence, our team of expert witnesses based in London prepares personal risk assessments for asylum cases. We work with immigration lawyers across the UK, US, Canada, and EU. If you need an expert witness report for your case, or if you're a lawyer looking for a country expert, you will find all the details in the link in the description below. Let us start with Albania. Albania has a serious problem with domestic violence, and we see this in our cases again and again. In 2006, Albania passed a law on measures against violence in family relations. This law exists, but the enforcement is very weak. Albanian law says domestic violence is a crime. Police can issue protection orders. Courts can issue restraining orders. But in practice, the police often refuse to act. They tell the woman to go home. They say it is a private family matter. Restraining orders are issued sometimes, but they are rarely enforced. The abuser violates the order, and nothing happens. We have worked on 5 cases from Albania involving domestic violence. I will tell you about one composite case. I will call her Lira. Lira grew up in a city in central Albania. She witnessed domestic violence since childhood. Her father beat her mother. As she grew older, she experienced violence from her own partner. Lira went to the police 3 times. Each time, the police told her to resolve it within the family. No protection order was issued. No arrest was made. In some Albanian cases, we also see a connection between domestic violence and trafficking. Women who try to escape abusive families become vulnerable to traffickers. The state fails to protect them at every stage. The expert assesses that Albanian authorities are aware of the problem. Laws exist, but the gap between law and enforcement is enormous. Women who report domestic violence to the police are routinely ignored. This is what we call a failure of state protection. Next, Georgia. Georgia also has laws against domestic violence. The law on elimination of domestic violence was passed in 2006. Georgia also has a restraining order system. But, like Albania, enforcement is the problem. In Georgia, traditional gender roles are very strong. Men are seen as the heads of their families. Women are expected to keep the family together, even when they are being beaten. Divorce is seen as shameful. A woman who leaves her husband faces pressure from her own family to go back. We have worked on 5 cases from Georgia. I will call one client Maya. Maya married young. Her husband was violent from the beginning. She asked for a divorce. He refused. His family threatened her. She went to the police. They issued a restraining order, but her husband violated it. He came to her home. He threatened to kill her. The police did not arrest him. In one of our Georgian cases, the UK Home Office accepted that the woman had suffered persecution as a domestic violence victim. This is significant. The Home Office accepted the claim. But in many other Georgian cases, the Home Office argues that Georgia has made progress. They point to the new laws. They point to the shelters. The expert assesses this differently. The laws exist, but the culture of impunity remains. Police officers who are themselves implicated in abuse remain armed and operational. Shelters have limited capacity, and women who leave are at even greater risk. Ethiopia is a different context. Here, domestic violence intersects with armed conflict and political persecution. The war in the Tigray region, which started in November 2020, had catastrophic consequences for women and girls. During the Tigray conflict, soldiers used rape as a weapon of war. Women were raped in their homes, in detention centers, in front of their families. Those who survived face enormous stigma. Many were abandoned by their husbands and communities. The state was not just failing to protect them. In many cases, the state was the perpetrator. In detention centers, women face overcrowded conditions, torture, and sexual violence by security personnel. Enforced disappearances and extrajudicial executions are documented. India passed the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act in 2005, which entered into force in October 2006. This is a detailed law. It covers physical, sexual, emotional, and economic abuse. But the gap between law and reality is enormous. Police in India routinely refuse to register complaints from women. They tell the woman to go back to her husband. They tell her that a beating is normal. And for some women, the danger goes far beyond beatings. In some communities, especially in parts of northern India, honor killings are a real threat. A woman who leaves her husband or who marries outside her caste can be killed by her own family. But the Home Office argued 2 things. First, India has a sufficiency of protection. The law exists, the police exist. Second, internal relocation. India is a large country. She could move to another city. The expert disagreed. Caste-based discrimination compounds domestic violence. Family networks extend across the country. A woman from a traditional Sikh family cannot simply disappear in another city. She will be found. At the opening of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council on 23 February 2026, the President of the UN General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, addressed the issue of women's rights directly. She argued that if women, representing approximately half of the world's population, around 4 billion people, are not safe, then no one will be safe. Pakistan has laws against domestic violence. The Criminal Law Amendment Act addresses some forms of gender-based violence. Some provinces have their own domestic violence laws, but honor-related violence is often unprosecuted. Perpetrators walk free. What makes Pakistan particularly difficult for domestic violence survivors is the system itself. Women who report violence are often re-traumatized by the protection systems meant to help them. Police stations are hostile environments for women. Shelter homes, known as Darul Aman, have been criticized for conditions that resemble detention. Internal relocation is not a real option for most women in Pakistan. A woman alone, without family support, faces extreme vulnerability. Society is structured around family networks. Without them, a woman has no safety, no income, and no status. The expert assesses that the Pakistani state fails to provide adequate protection for domestic violence survivors. Society is complicit in preserving structures of impunity. The perpetrators are protected by the community. Russia. In 2017, Russia took a step that shocked many observers. It decriminalized first-time domestic violence. Under federal law number 8 of 7th of February 2017, amending Article 116 of the Criminal Code, first-time battery within the family that does not result in serious injury was reclassified from a criminal to an administrative offense, meaning a fine or brief administrative arrest, not a criminal prosecution. Criminal liability returns only if violence is repeated. Russia has no effective protective order system. There is no reliable legal mechanism to keep an abuser away from the victim between incidents. We worked on one case from Russia. I will call her Yulia. Yulia faced a double persecution. She participated in anti-war protests after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. She was also a victim of domestic violence. Her partner was violent. She went to the police for both the violence and for her protest activity. The police were not interested in protecting her from either threat. Belarus. Since the political crisis of 2020, Belarus has seen massive political repression. Women who participated in protests face both political persecution and gender-based violence. Legal protections for domestic violence victims are limited. There is no comprehensive dedicated domestic violence law, and the political climate makes it impossible for women to seek help from a state that is itself their persecutor. Let us now go through the remaining countries quickly. In each of these, we have analyzed at least one case. The pattern is the same. The state fails to protect. Nigeria. We worked on a case from Nigeria where a woman faced violence from her partner and her extended family. Nigeria's Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act was passed at the federal level in 2015. However, as of recent years, fewer than half of the country's 36 states have fully implemented it into their own legislation. In those states, without local implementation, there remains no specific legal protection against domestic violence in practice. Rwanda. In Rwanda, domestic violence is widespread, despite the country's reputation for gender equality in formal politics. The legal framework, including the Law on Prevention and Punishment of Gender-Based Violence of 2008, exists, but enforcement in rural areas remains very weak. Trinidad and Tobago. I want to mention this case specifically. One of our clients from Trinidad is a man who fled domestic violence. His partner was violent. He became homeless. This shows that domestic violence is not only a women's issue. Men also suffer, and men often find it even harder to get help because services are primarily designed for women. Somalia. Women in Somalia face some of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world. There is no functioning state to protect them. Al-Shabaab-controlled areas operate under conditions where women have no access to legal protection. Eritrea. Eritrea is one of the most closed countries in the world. Domestic violence is widespread. Women subjected to indefinite national service face double persecution, both as those who resist conscription and as women. Bangladesh. Domestic violence is extremely common. The domestic violence Prevention and Protection Act of 2010 exists but is poorly implemented. Acid attacks remain a serious risk. Nicaragua. Since the political crisis of 2018, women's rights organizations have been shut down. Domestic violence survivors have nowhere to turn. The state is both unwilling and unable to protect them. Syria. After more than a decade of war, Syria has no functioning protection systems. Women face violence from family members, armed groups, and the state. There is no safe place. Djibouti, Libya, Sudan, and Jordan. In all four countries, the legal framework for protecting domestic violence survivors is either absent or ineffective. Cultural norms prioritize family honor over women's safety. Police do not treat domestic violence as a crime. So, is it dangerous for a domestic violence survivor to return to their country? This is the central question in every asylum case. And the answer depends on one thing. Does the state protect the person? Let me explain this simply. Domestic violence on its own is not automatically a reason for asylum. Many people experience domestic violence in every country, but domestic violence becomes persecution when the state cannot or will not protect the victim. This is a legal concept called failure of state protection. Here is how the expert assesses this. First, the expert looks at the law. Does the country have a domestic violence law? What does it say? What are the penalties? Second, the expert looks at enforcement. Are these laws actually enforced? Do police respond? Are there convictions? Third, the expert looks at the individual case. Did this person report? What happened when they reported? Was there a pattern of failure? When all three of these point in the same direction, the law is weak, enforcement is absent, and the individual experience repeated failures, then the expert's opinion is clear. The state cannot or will not protect this person. Return is unsafe. Now, grant rates. How often are domestic violence claims accepted? The answer varies by country. For some countries, like Albania and Georgia, the United Kingdom has relatively high grant rates for women fleeing domestic violence. The Home Office recognizes the enforcement gap. For other countries, like India or Pakistan, the Home Office often argues that there is a sufficiency of protection. They say the law exists. They say the police exist. They argue for internal relocation. The expert challenges this. Having a law is not the same as enforcing a law. Having a police force is not the same as having a police force that responds. Internal relocation. This is one of the most common arguments the Home Office uses against domestic violence claims. They say, you can move to another city in your country. The abuser will not find you. But for most domestic violence survivors, this argument does not work because family networks are strong. In countries like India, Pakistan, Albania, and Georgia, families have connections everywhere. A woman who moves to another city can be found because women who flee domestic violence often have no economic independence. They have no money, no job, no education. Moving to another city means being alone, vulnerable, and destitute. And because cultural norms follow you, a divorced woman in Pakistan or India faces stigma everywhere, not just in her hometown. International law is clear on this. The 1951 Geneva Convention on Refugees protects people who face persecution and cannot get protection from their own state. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 5, says no one shall be subjected to torture or cruel treatment. The European Convention on Human Rights, Article 3, prohibits torture and inhuman treatment. Article 8 protects private and family life. Domestic violence survivors who cannot get state protection are protected by all of these instruments. At the Human Rights Council session in early 2026, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, spoke about the global struggle for women's rights and bodily autonomy. He described women and young people as those at the forefront of movements claiming fundamental rights, to fair pay, to bodily autonomy, to self-determination, to be heard. And UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, warned during the Commission on the Status of Women in March 2026 that rates of gender-based violence, including sexual violence, exploitation, harassment, and trafficking, are likely to increase in the current global context. So, what does the expert conclude? The expert witness cannot accept or reject the applicant's testimony. That is the court's role. The court decides if the person is telling the truth. But if the court accepts the testimony and the persecution context is confirmed by country evidence, then, in the expert's opinion, the risk upon return is obvious. The state failed to protect the person before they left. The expert sees no evidence that the state's ability to protect has improved. The laws remain weak or weakly enforced. The police remain unwilling to act. The cultural norms remain unchanged. Internal relocation is also unsafe in most cases for domestic violence survivors. The reasons are the ones we discussed: family networks, economic vulnerability, social stigma. This is not about one country. This is a pattern we see across all 19 countries in this analysis. This is why a personal assessment of each individual case is critically important. Every person's situation is different. The country may be the same. The type of violence may be the same, but the details matter. Did the person report to the police? How many times? What was the response? Does the person have family connections that could help or that could harm? Is the person from a minority group that faces additional risks? All of these factors are assessed by the country expert. All of them go into the expert witness report. And all of them can make the difference between a successful asylum claim and a refusal. If you are from one of these countries and you have fled domestic violence, an expert witness report can strengthen your asylum case. This was an episode of the Human Rights. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and I will see you in the next one. Take care.